potenciales mercados. Este es nuestro primer INFODAY del mercado africano y haremos próximamente más, de los cuales os iremos informando. Hoy tenemos con nosotros, representando a Market Access, a Beatriz Moral y Pedro Avieira. Y en colaboración, en representación de Zurkon International, tenemos a Richard Zurba y Lindsay Zurba, quienes nos van a hablar del potencial del mercado africano. Richard Zurba, director de Zurkon International, nos hará una presentación relacionada con las oportunidades y cómo hacer negocios en los mercados africanos. Lindsay, como especialista en el sector de la salud, compartirá los conocimientos específicos del sector que tiene de trabajar en un gran número de países africanos. Muchas gracias. Now I'm going to repeat this information in English. Good morning, everyone. Before starting the webinar, inform you that this webinar is going to be recorded. My name is Laura Castaño, and together with Isela García Álvarez, we are in CSG representation. Firstly, I have to mention that from CSG, we are launching these INFODAYs to have a clearer vision to the potential markets. This is our first INFODAY of the African market, and soon more will be done, so we will keep you informed. Today, we have with us representing Market Access, Beatriz Moral and Pedro Avieira, and in collaboration on representation of Zurkon International, we have Richard Zurba and Lindsay Zurba, who are going to talk to us about the potential of the African market. Richard Zurba, director of Zurkon International, he will give us a presentation related to opportunities and how to do business in African markets. Lindsay, as a specialist in the health sector, will share the specific knowledge of the sector that she has from working in a large number of African countries. So thank you very much. Maybe Beatriz is going to present Market Access, so I give you the turn.
Gracias, Laura. Gracias, Richard, Lindsay. Gracias a todos los participantes. Básicamente lo que yo haré será un poco representar y presentar Market Access y un poco pues hablar de nuestra colaboración con Zurkon International en Sudáfrica. Market Access es una consultora portuguesa con 16 años de antigüedad. Llevamos en el mercado apoyando a las empresas privadas, entidades como organismos intermedios, clusters, asociaciones, municipios, a internacionalizar su industria, ¿no? Sus empresas. Agradecemos al CSG esta oportunidad para bueno, potenciar también vuestro interés en el mercado africano. Market Access tiene oficinas propias en Oporto y en São Paulo, Market Access Brasil, pero luego tenemos una red internacional que abordamos 50 mercados y uno de los mercados que abordamos es Sudáfrica y otros mercados africanos en colaboración con Zurkon International. Y bueno, un poquito por ahí, yo como no soy especialista ni en el mercado ni en el sector de la salud, pues pasaría la palabra a Richard y a Lindsay, o a ti, Laura, para que hagas un poco de moderación. Y bueno, básicamente es un poquito eso, ¿no? Market Access es una empresa, es una consultora dedicada a la internacionalización de negocios y uno de los mercados que apoyaremos será los mercados africanos. No sé si tienes alguna cuestión, Laura.
No, no, creo que está todo correcto. Si no hay nada, vamos a darle paso a Richard para que haga la presentación, ¿no? So, Richard, you can start wherever you want.
¿No tienes el micro?
So, Richard, now we are actually having troubles hearing you. Before it was working perfectly.
Yeah. It's strange.
We did some tests. No, still no.
Es que no aparece como, o sea, aparece como que va a hablar.
Did you change your settings, Richard? Here, because I don't know if you plug in some microphones or something, because
Maybe using headphones and now not. I don't know.
Well, no need to panic. You can just click on the icon of the phone, the one that is a phone, and that will take you out. There. Let's try this first. Now you're silent. Let's try this again. Unmute yourself. Okay, now talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. There you go. All
Perfect.
set.
Now let me
All set.
try without the microphone, so
Okay.
Lindsay can say hello.
No, it's just
No,
because when we did the
it's because
settings,
of the headphones.
yeah, when we did the settings, you had the headphones on. If you want to have the possibility, you can exit the room and start again, but that might risk your presentation. We have to load it again. And now, no, I don't know. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
No. No.
It's again. You can do the same as you did before.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
it's
should-
okay now. So
Okay, we should be able to hear now. So unfortunately, we'll have to keep the settings as they are, but thank you, everybody. And we're looking forward to a very interesting and informative talk today about Africa. Spain has created a new economic strategy toward Africa in the last 3 months. And so this is a very interesting time for you as Spanish businesses to be investigating the African market. Things are happening across Africa, which make it a very interesting market. So I'm very excited to be presenting. I'd like to introduce my wife, Lindsay, and she works in healthcare as well. She is a practitioner with a company that does education in the healthcare sector. Her specialty is spirometry, which is part of the respiratory area. And Lindsay, would you like to just say hello to everybody?
Morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to join your meeting this morning. I'm looking forward to hearing what Richard has to say. We have very different areas of expertise, and I think can come together to form quite a strong team to help everybody as they look into the African market. So again, thanks very much, and looking forward to meeting you and working with you. Oops.
Excellent. So we're going to be presenting about Africa as a general market, and then specifically zeroing in on a couple of countries that are going to be of key interest, hopefully to your collective. So I'd like to just draw your attention to the slides as we go. If you are able to manage the size of the slides as we go along, and I believe that if you're familiar with the system, you can see it. So Laura, everything okay? And we can start.
Yeah, everything is perfect.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Yeah. So we've been working now for more than 21 years. We have staff across Africa in a lot of different countries. We work very with a lot of different companies in a lot of different sectors, but healthcare is one of the key sectors that we're involved with. Healthcare is a key growing sector across Africa, given the opportunities for Spanish companies. This is a very good time to be looking at the different opportunities. But right now we have staff, as you can see on the map, right across Africa. We also have staff in the Caribbean as well, and we work very closely with market access, with companies that want to come into the African market. And we've been looking forward to this presentation. So just know that we have a lot of experience. Presently, our company represents 8 American state governments, and that includes the state of New York and a few others. And we also do work with a lot of national and subnational governments as well. So very quickly, and I don't know if this animation is going to work, but Africa, by the end of this century, is going to be almost 40% of the world's total population, which is very interesting. Africa is the only region in the world that is growing demographically very quickly. If we look at other markets, even India has slowed down, and their natural growth rate demographically is very small. And this picture was really meant to be an animation that showed that Africa will be becoming a very key market that no one will be able to ignore in the near future. So just as we look at the burden of disease overall, you can see that Africa has a relatively big burden of disease relative to the population right now, relative to the economic size of the region. And so there is a lot of problems in the African healthcare sector in terms of the total amount of people who are ill. Then, if we look at the burden of disease overall, excuse me, if we look at the burden of disease overall, we're seeing a shift toward non-communicable diseases. And this is an area, for example, where Lindsay is involved in. And she's more involved in respiratory health with asthma, these kinds of things. But we're seeing that communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases, as the lifestyle improves, we're having problems with hypertension and diabetes and a lot of requirements, asthma, like I mentioned. So a lot of the requirements are shifting more toward what you've seen in developing countries, and from developing countries to developed countries. And we're seeing the opportunities for the different sectors come and shift very strongly toward the non-communicable side. And this just gives you an indication of the non-communicable diseases in the top blue line at the very top, and relatively speaking, how the other two communicable diseases and then trauma at the bottom. So we can see that the NCDs are increasing as a total problem in the continent, and even in South Africa. Here we have a very good friend who works with the South African Non-Communicable Diseases Alliance, and so this is a key area of growth. So if we look at, for example, the burden of diabetes, you can see that the growth factor for diabetes is strongest in Africa, for example. So if your company is involved in that sector, then it's really important. So where Africa is right now, importantly, diagnosis is critical. And because we're seeing a lot of people with new developments with healthcare requirements, and so diagnostics is incredibly important because we're seeing big shifts in the population right across the needs sectors. Now, what is really interesting about Africa, and one of the key things is that I mentioned that Africa is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. And in fact, by the year 2050, most of the people in the labor market, the new entrants into the labor market, are going to be from Africa. So Spain is fortunate because it is geographically very close to Africa. But if you look at where the demographics are, we have Africa, a very young, demographically oriented region, and we see Europe is aging and it's getting older. Replacement of population isn't happening at a natural rate, so we have a declining younger population. But interestingly, if we look at China, China is actually almost in a demographic disaster, and it's likely that if things don't change, they'll have only half of the population by the time the century ends. So they could go from 1.4 billion to 750 million by the end of this century, whereas Africa is going to go from 1.3 billion to likely over 4 billion people. So this is really important. The fact is that Africa will remain a young population for very, very long. For most of the time that most of us who are listening will have a career, Africa will remain a young population, and we're going to have to adjust to that. The size of the market is increasing, and not only is the size of the market increasing, but the GDP per capita is increasing, meaning that people here have a better ability to pay for the requirements of the middle class lifestyle. And so, importantly, it could be a disaster. It could be that the population grows and then there's no money to feed and to pay for the things, but this is not the case. Since about the year 2000, there's been a big shift, and I'll talk about that. But why, Africa is becoming increasingly able to pay for itself in terms of the medical side of things. And so the general requirements relative to population, as the population goes toward 2035, for example, this slide indicates that we can see that there's going to be a greater need for emphasis on young families, on the young children being born, and trying to manage the younger part of the population. Governments cannot ignore this because typically in most African countries, people between 18 to 32 are the majority of the voting population. And if you look at a country like Spain, 32 is not even your average age. I'm sure your average age is probably close to 40. Most of the European countries are getting close to 40 on one side or the other. So Africa, the average age is 19.5. And in some countries, it's below 18. Nigeria has an average age of 17 and a half years old. So we can see that the needs relatively to the total population are going to be very important. Now, one thing that we have had with COVID is that as COVID affects mostly aged people over 65 and over, Africa has been able to avoid a lot of the problems because we don't have a very large old population. We only have about 40 million people that are above the age of 65. And we have 1.25 billion people who are under that age. So Africa's very young. And even with the COVID pandemic, we haven't been that much affected simply because we don't have an older population. But if you compare it with Europe, you can see that the effects of COVID have been very radical in Europe, and the effects in Africa, relatively speaking, have been very modest. Now, interestingly enough, because of cultural factors, people have a very high respect for, typically for older people, and so families take a lot of precautions to protect their older people typically. But a lot of the assistance in COVID hasn't been from the government side because African governments don't have a lot of money to put into stimulus or unemployment benefits. So it's been the personal responsibility of the families to manage. And so although we do have a growing older class of people, the relative size of that older class is relatively small compared to the younger. And I just wanted to bring that slide up. But very quickly, Africa is a very big continent. You can put a lot of, if you were to superimpose Spain over it, you could probably put easily 50 Spains into Africa. And just, I put the United States as to show the relative size. So we're many times the size of Western Europe here in Africa. And the region that we cover is actually the size of almost all of the Americas, Canada, where I'm from originally, and the United States, Mexico, all of South America. Africa is almost the entire size of all of the Americas together geographically, so it's very big. And then if you look at where the population is located, we see that if you look at the cluster of population on the far right map, it shows that there's a very strong move from Ethiopia down to South Africa. And then in West Africa, there's a lot of population density in Nigeria and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. But interestingly, if you look at the middle map, the countries with English as a national language almost reflect where the densest population is. So if you're listening to this and you're able to understand me in English, then you have a competitive advantage in coming into Africa because you're able to do business in about 60% of the continent without too much difficulty. And as we know, there really are only a couple of places in Africa that speak Spanish. And of course, one of them is the Canary Islands, where one of my good friends lives. Apparently, it's like Spain's Hawaii in the middle of the Atlantic, but the other is Equatorial Guinea. And Lindsay actually does some work there in Equatorial Guinea with companies that need requirements for respiratory health. So the continent is very vast from a cultural perspective and from a geographic perspective. From an economic perspective, it's 55 different countries, all of them with different policies, but we're going to see that these policy issues are coming together, and Africa is forming a considerable trade bloc that they're working on right now, that Spain is taking advantage of, which is very good news. So, but one of the key things that we see with the demographic shift is that there's been a major shift in the culture here. And young people, particularly under 30 years old, are moving toward a more middle-class outlook. They're not becoming, in terms of, in sociological terms, we would call it secularized. They're retaining their traditional values, but becoming more modern. And this is a very interesting change that's happening in Africa, and it's actually going to be the factor that's going to be changing the way Africa is doing business in the world. Because young people are, if I go through the points here, and this is important for you to understand as you look at entering the African market. The first thing is they look at accomplishments and personal accomplishments, particularly in the fields of education or creating a business or managing something. These are becoming incredibly important. So the old collectivist ways of doing things are changing, and young people are much more merit-based. They're becoming more focused on how to do business and do it well, to create a comfortable middle-class lifestyle for them. They're still vulnerable because they've grown up with very little, and there isn't a big social net like we have in countries like Spain or Canada. You know, we have to, if somebody has a big problem, you've got to rely on your family. So there's still a number of vulnerabilities in case you meet a dire financial or a disease problem. And then the other thing is that young people in Africa are extremely, are still very respectful of tradition, including the family. And interestingly, they are becoming less secular in their religious beliefs. Interestingly enough, church attendance in Africa has doubled in the last 30 years. It hasn't diminished, it's actually doubled. And so young people are more likely to go to belong to a faith community now than their parents' generation, which is very interesting. And it's the opposite direction that Europe and Canada and other countries have gone. And so we see that there's a real need. But interestingly enough, all of these values together pull into the fact that Africa, the young African people, are very entrepreneurial and very hardworking. And this has brought in some very interesting factors, because when you have a young population, by nature, they're going to be very creative. And if you can take that creativity and harness it, you're going to be doing relatively well, because you can take your idea, you can find the need, and if you're able to create a solution, all you need is the money to make it work. And interestingly enough, Africa is now at that point. And so I'll come to a slide later on that discusses this, but we're in a place where we have a very fast growing population, and the GDP per capita is increasing very quickly. So relatively speaking, the middle class is pulling the economy up, but a lot of this activity is based in the younger people in the middle class. And if you look at the new wealthy who are in Africa, many of them are below 30, which is very interesting. You don't have to be an old person to be connected into the economy. Young people are able to do that. And so we're seeing that they're taking advantage of this growth on a local basis, but international companies are also able to do this. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area is able to take all of the countries, and the vision for the region now is for Africa to become a trading bloc very similar to the European Union. Although it would be probably more similar, if you're familiar with your European history, with the European Economic Community than with the European Union per se, because Africa's learned a few lessons about the politicizing nature of joining a lot of countries together. They want all the economic benefits, but they don't necessarily want the politics involved. So we're going to see where this will go, but in January of 2021, the free trade area was put into place. It's been a long time coming, and Africa does have the ability to grow this into a very important grouping. If you can look at the free trade areas in Africa that already exist right now, there's a lot of understanding administratively of how to manage these things. So they're going to be pulling everything together so that 54 countries on the continent which have signed on to the treaty are going to be coming into one common market. And then they're going to be developing common phytosanitary requirements within the next few years. And they're going to be developing a common regulatory requirement for a lot of things over the next few years. So in some ways, it's going to be one market that will be more easily understandable. And this market, by the time 20 years goes by, it's going to be one of the biggest markets in the world in relative terms. Right now, it's only 3.6, maybe 3.2 trillion euros in size. So maybe not so big relative to Western Europe, but if we're looking at 20 years into the future, the African continental economy will be absolutely enormous. And the good thing is that although Spain is on the doorstep of Africa, and we know that Spain has a lot of problems sociologically being on the doorstep of Africa, it will also have a lot of benefits being on the doorstep of Africa. And the benefit for companies from all over Spain is that the Spanish government is taking interest in this. Now, if we look at who is going to benefit, which countries are going to benefit the quickest from the regional trade bloc, we see it's Ghana, South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Morocco. These are the countries that have typically the most developed logistics infrastructure so that things can come into their ports and be moved back. Okay, sorry, I think I lost you for just a second.
You muted yourself accidentally, so.
Yeah, I was trying to switch things. Sorry, apologies. So we can see that there's 5 countries that are really benefiting and are immediately benefiting from the African Continental Free Trade Area, and that is Ghana, South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Morocco. And these are because they each serve as a regional base for distribution into other countries around them. So these, where you have a very good metropolitan base for distribution into other regions, you're going to find a lot of potential for your country to benefit. Now, the good thing is with all of this is that Spain understands all of this, and I apologize for the slide with some of the printing, but Spain is looking toward creating strategic alliances with a number of countries. And we can see that right now South Africa, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, and Ethiopia are where key agreements are already in place and are ongoing. And then we can see that there's 7 priority nations: Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Kenya, Angola, Mozambique, and Tanzania. These are very good and important ones. And these are ones where we are working with Spanish companies in some of these. And then we have countries of economic interest: Morocco, which is already important to Spain, Algeria, Egypt, Rwanda, and Uganda. But what is also very interesting is that we have Ghana during the signing of the strategic change on the 19th of March this year. The president of Ghana visited Madrid, and he signed a memorandum of understanding with the Spanish government for investment and trade. So Ghana is very keenly interested in working with Spain and is going to do everything it can to be partnering with the Spanish government. So the president of Ghana has given his purpose-driven word that Spanish companies are welcome to come to Ghana, and this is really important. And interestingly enough, when word comes from the top, when it comes from the executive office, you actually do get a better welcome sometimes than if you come from another place that isn't as welcoming. So this is important, and I think that this is why I wanted to flag this, that the government of Ghana and the government of Spain are committed to doing business with each other, and they're committed to helping each other's companies to come in. And, you know, from a bureaucratic perspective, you might think, oh, well, if you're from Europe, you know, a company, yeah, they have an agreement and all of that. But in an African country, if your president has said your companies are welcome, then it makes for a better environment for you to enter. So just a few quick things about the different sectors that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be looking at just bringing the some of the statistics together. But the healthcare market in Africa is growing very quickly. It's growing at 8 to 9% per year, which is more than double the actual economy growth. So we're seeing that the medical sector overall is growing very fast right across Africa. One area that is very important, of course, is the device market. And the good thing about the device market is that a lot of our regulatory requirements do come from Europe. So if you're already working under the European marks, you're going to be able to get a faster response into much of the rest of Africa. Here in South Africa, we actually have very minimal requirements for regulatory entry into the country for medical devices. Medical devices do not have to be regulated per device. They're regulated by the company that does the importation. In Ghana, it's very different. For example, some other countries are much more particular and run off of the European model or the British model, which merged into the European model. So we are, if you're coming from Europe, you're going to find that things are much better. The other thing is that Europe and the African, much of the African continent already have free trade agreements, and the European Union and the African Continental Free Trade Area are right now working on a comprehensive agreement where most European goods are eventually going to be entering duty-free into most of Africa. And so this is a very positive development. So just quickly, some statistics on the medical devices in South Africa, particularly. South Africa is the largest purchaser of medical devices, and the European market has the biggest share. And then just quickly about the medical device industry, I don't want to go into this, but being an emerging market, Africa in general has emerging market problems. And so we have to look at the difference in maybe doing business in some ways. But this also presents some of the problems, as you might know, create a differentiation in the market needs, and that can present opportunities for Spanish companies. Presently, the pharmaceutical sector in Africa is worth approximately $25 billion or 20 billion euros. And we can see that the growth is looking very healthy, and we're looking for a very fast growth there. Now with e-health, this is one area where we've seen a tremendous amount of growth over the last few months, particularly with the COVID sector, but also in general, we have a lack of logistics for people to get from one place to another. So telemedicine has grown in importance. Platforms to assist with nursing care, with all kinds of things. These are becoming incredibly important. So presently, we have 180 active firms in e-health, and this is probably not even, this is using last year's numbers. We're seeing a very quick uptake in the number of companies in the sector, and generally we're looking at approximately 1 in every 5 companies that are entering the high-tech sector in Africa, which right now is a very fast-growing market. 1 in 5 of these are related to the health sector. So that means that there's a big demand, and people are taking up this demand with new interest. And so although last year's figures were 90 million of new capital raised for new companies, new entrants in the market who are based here, there's a big need for demand for existing systems that are coming from all over the world to deal with Africa's health issues. So e-health is critically important, and our companies, Market Access and Zircom International, have partnered to work with companies in this area particularly, and we have lots of experience working with this area. So in confidence, we're looking at, relatively speaking, venture capital startups are now taking about $2.8 billion a year. That's what's projected for this year. And by 2025, we're going to see 10 billion. So likely that $90 million that you see in 2020 is probably going to be something closer to 200 or 250 million for new startups alone. And that's critically important to understand. So we have a big interest, and capital is coming from Europe and America and Asia to help entrepreneurs here develop ideas. But the important thing is that we've got that youthful class of young people that are very tech savvy and are easy to work with. And so interestingly enough, if you've come in and you've got a concept and you've developed it, it's possible for you to find a good partner, and then you can move ahead with your with introducing your company into the marketplace. Just quickly, overall, the total sector for IT health is somewhere around 4 billion euros, and if we look at the total value of the IT sector, healthcare is just more than around 15% of it. So we've got a relatively fast-growing IT sector, which is very interesting for companies. The other area that is very important is hospital architecture. Where you can see the biggest demand is obviously in some of the places where there is a relatively low income rate. And so countries like Nigeria, for example, have a huge demand, but less of an ability to pay. And where there's a smaller demand, like in South Africa, and there's more of an ability to pay, then we still have big needs. And so if you're in the hospital architecture area, or areas that help to formulate what is required in a hospital, management operations in hospitals, These are all big requirements for Africa, and these are areas that we have expertise in helping companies to come in and meet partners. And then if we look at ICU beds across Africa, relatively speaking, you see that South Africa has a relatively big proportion of the total number of beds, for example, but other countries where there's a relatively large population are going to be a little more toward the growth phase. And so we're seeing countries like Kenya and Tanzania and Ghana, where the economies are growing very quickly. They're going to be catching up with South Africa. And within the next 15 years, for example, the economies of Kenya and Tanzania will be equal to South Africa. And so we're going to likely see an equalization of the relative size of the numbers of hospital beds. And this is indicated for just for purposes of an illustration with ICU beds here. So here's some statistics on what the total size of the hospital architecture is in South Africa. And interestingly, in a lot of countries in Africa, the private sector is critically important. Here in South Africa, it's about half of the total budget. In Nigeria, for example, it's more than half, even though they do have an official policy to work toward national health. And so the private healthcare sector does carry a lot of the people that are middle class and are insured and want a quick response to their problems. And typically the public systems are very slow at moving, not well funded, and not as well managed. So most of the time when you come into a market, into Africa, you're likely going to want to tie into a partner that has links into the private system. And then after your product or your service has been working in that side for quite a while, then the public service will take notice. The other thing is that healthcare training is critically important. And this is an area where my wife is involved, of course. And you can see that some countries in Africa are matching the area of average global doctors and nurses and other health professions. But most of Africa is below this line, and it's well below this line. So there's a big demand for the ability to train good staff. One problem that we have in Africa is that once we've trained them, they want to go to other places, and other countries that don't train as many doctors as they need. And my own home country, Canada, is guilty of that because it's expensive to train a doctor in Canada. So they rely on doctors coming from other parts of the world. And if you're willing to set up in a small town, you can go move to Canada and they'll give you your visa within a matter of a couple of months and you can be a medical doctor there. And so we have the same problem that staff people from Africa are very quickly to be hired in other countries. For example, Ghana sent a large number of nurses to Barbados, for example. So where one country can source from another, there's a lot of opportunity, and we are in a deficit for two reasons. Number one, the training doesn't quite match the requirement, and then the other factor is that experienced medical professionals can get jobs elsewhere in the world that pay better. And this is an economic issue, it's a political issue, but it's a big issue. And if you're part of this healthcare training sector, this is an interesting area to continue to get involved in. There's a lot of trade exhibitions right around the continent to take advantage of, and the sector is very active and vibrant. I would say that if you come to any one of these trade shows, you're going to see a lot of companies from China. Let me give you a few thoughts on the China competition. The first thing is that the African middle class, which is focusing on healthcare for their young families, is typically interested in the best possible global care. And so we do see competition from China in a lot of areas, but China isn't typically at the top of the quality chain for a lot of the medical rollouts that are required for the population here. And there isn't a big trust factor in a lot of things that do come from China. So coming from Spain, it's assumed that your company has a higher quality and it will be able to match or better the Chinese in terms of the quality. And hopefully you'll be able to match in price as well. But even so, there is a lot of competition. So just be aware of that and understand that the competitive market includes a lot of countries from everywhere. But I would also say that where you see competition in Spain itself is typically going to be the same types of competitors competing in different market shares in Africa. So you'll see the Americans, the Germans, maybe some Indians, and it could even be some medical distribution companies from Thailand for consumables, for example. You'll see a lot of the same, a lot of the similarities, but in different market shares. And so the idea is, if you're coming and you're visiting, it's a good idea to understand your market thoroughly and to have a really good idea and study before you come to the market and to visit. One good thing about Africa is that it's a very interesting and fun place to visit. People are very hospitable and they enjoy meeting new people from other countries and doing business with them. So we've typically had only good stories to have, when we have travelers coming into Africa and they're looking for parties to meet with. We have a very good reception for our Spanish companies, and the continent is very actively open and interested in working with Spanish companies. So to sum up, we have a market that is welcoming to Spain. It's geographically very close. Your government is aligned with strategies to enter the African market. Your products are considered to be quality when you enter, and you yourselves, people from Galicia, are more relationship oriented than people from some of the bigger centers, from Madrid or from Germany even, or from New York, or and that gives you a competitive advantage in the market. It's really important to understand that relationships help you to create further transactions, and everything works toward that in your business relationships as well. So being a Galician by your own culture would really help you, because you understand the value of relationships in business more than most people from a lot of the markets of Europe or North America. And that is really going to be one of your competitive advantages. So I'm maybe if I could just pass to Lindsay quickly, and if there's any comments about any of the issues that I've brought up, maybe you'd like to bring them up. Lindsay has experience working in well over 20 countries of Africa. My staff are located right across Africa as well. But maybe, Lindsay, if you can just tell people that there is a difference in working in different countries of Africa.
Yes, certainly. Every country has a different culture and a different way of doing things. So there are sometimes overlaps and expectations across the countries that you can expect certain things of people depending on what it is. But then you also have to take into account the very country-specific ways of doing things. So once you've chosen your potential markets, we can probably help you with some insights into each individual market as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. So with Lindsay and with myself, we can go on and tell you all kinds of different concepts about working in different markets. We do have one of our staff people from Ghana online right now, and Cephas is able also to maybe entertain some conversation. And so we're thankful for the time that you've given us, and now we'd like to open up for questions and answers. And if you like to, maybe you could put something on the public chat, and we can try to answer it. And Laura, if you would like to moderate, that'd be excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Laura, I'm gonna activate my camera 1 second. Sorry.
Alberto.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Alberto. That's a very good question about payments.
Exactly.
And
I was gonna say if you could see it. Perfect.
Yes. So Africa is actually becoming less corrupt. And this is because the young people, they actually really hate corruption because it doesn't work in their interests. So we're seeing a lot of change between what the older generation values, and often these are people who are still in control politically, and what the younger people are valuing. So it's important to understand that as a company, when you look at companies that are doing business in Africa, if you're generally trying to tie in with a company that has 40 years of experience, is well connected politically, is part of the establishment, it's quite possible that they're going to be more involved in having corruption involved with their way of doing business. If you're involved with a younger company, typically they're going to be less interested in the corruption side, focused on the technical aspects of things, and then trying to sell purely on the technical aspects. Now, younger companies typically don't have the money to bribe people, which is also a good thing, but young companies doing business with young companies is also very good, because the understanding is that the transaction should be relatively pure. So one reason why we're seeing such fast growth in Africa is because corruption is diminishing in a lot of the countries. And so we've seen that corruption typically where it's very strong is having a big effect. And maybe I can just mention Nigeria. It's the corruption in Nigeria has affected the economy, and everybody knows this, but young people in Nigeria are actually rioting. They've rioted in the streets this year because of this very issue. And the problem is that you'll get a politician that will come in, and he'll get the votes based on a non-corruption platform, and then maybe within 2 or 3 years he'll become corrupt himself and then have to be thrown out. So we see this happening in other countries, but typically the move is toward less corruption. In terms of payment, it's important to understand that some countries have a floating currency. So, South Africa, there's usually no payment, no problem. But if you're dealing with Angola, a company there has to get Reserve Bank approval. So they may have US dollars in their account, or they may have euros in their account to pay you, but they can't get approval to pay, and this is a problem. So this also can be an issue. But I would also say that in terms of working with companies, the first thing you have to look for is find a partner of good character. And this is why we're here. We don't want to help companies meet companies that are going to lead them into corruption. We don't want that. And so part of the reason that we exist is to help to filter that out of your business day. And so when we have meetings, we want typically to find companies that have a good long-standing presence in the market. They understand all the technical aspects of working through their channels of distribution and that kind of thing. So corruption is a problem. Payments can be a problem. Sometimes you want to ask for cash in advance. And just be aware that it is on a case-by-case basis, but the first barrier, the first hurdle that you need to do is to find a partner that is aligned with your values and then to work with them in the long term. And once your company has a reputation for not being corrupt, it's going to be very positive for you, and you won't get into the cycle of having to pay other people who know that you've paid money to another one and another one and another one. It can be a problem. So this is what we've seen over many years of experience. Alberto, political links. Security, murders, kidnapping. Okay. The first thing is that in the many years of doing trade missions and bringing hundreds of business people to Africa, we've never had a company person being injured or hurt into as they've come to do business. So if you're staying in the hotels and you're going from the airport to the hotel and you're doing it in a safe kind of a way, typically you should be very safe. Even in a country like South Africa where the crime is very high, the crime is mostly in a lot of the areas where you'll never go. And so you've got to understand that 80% of the crime in Africa, it's people perpetrating the crime against somebody that they know. And the other thing in most African countries is that for business travelers, the police and the government are very aligned to protect those business travelers because they see it as a connection for their own economy. They see it as something very positive. And so you'll get a very good response typically that a typical citizen would not get sometimes. So it's important to realize that we deal with this, and we would make suggestions on how for you to stay safe. My suggestion is the same things that you would do to stay safe in Spain, you don't do in Africa. So you don't get drunk at 3 in the morning in a city you don't know. These are things you just normally wouldn't do. We want you to also enjoy your time in Africa because Africa does have some of the nicest scenery. So maybe to take that on the flip side, one of the really nice things about traveling in Africa is that you can go on safari, you can visit islands. If you're traveling to Tanzania, for example, you want to visit Zanzibar. If you're going to Ghana, you might want to visit some of the national parks. If you're coming to South Africa, you might want to go on a 2-day safari or something. Make that part of your trip because that will allow you to make better, it'll make you enjoy the country. And when you enjoy the country, people are going to be doing a better sales pitch. You're going to be having more to talk about with your parties, with your counterparts, and it will make your trip more enjoyable. They will see that in you, and they'll see that you're enjoying the country. You'll have something to talk about. And so spending a few €100 on enjoying your time in the country before you have the meetings, I think is a valuable investment. I don't see it as a cost, as frivolous. I think it's important for you to understand parts of the country, not only to say hello, but also to just to understand a bit of the history, but also enjoy yourself in the country. See some of the really interesting parts of things and have a life experience, and that will allow you to benefit. One important thing for small companies is that they do business where they enjoy doing business. That's actually statistically shown, and companies that want to travel to an interesting market, if they're having fun, they're going to do a lot more business than if they aren't. And I've met so many companies that have gone to China, gone to India, and they like Africa a lot better because it's a lot more fun. and they're going to do more business here because it's just the way people are. If it's the market, then it's something you can push a little harder, and you enjoy pushing because it's a place that you enjoy. So I would like to say, yes, Alberto, the first key is finding the right partner, and that's why companies like Market Access and Zircom exist. We help you to do that. The next thing is to find being in the right market, but also just to conduct yourself safely, to do something of excellence with your clients, to support your clients 100% in the market like you would with a Spanish company. And I think that if you have all of those values aligned, then your entry into Africa is going to be a good one. And keep in mind, this market is growing very quickly. So if you come in today, the market that you come into will be double the size in 5 years, and then double again in 10. And so growing with your company and developing those relationships as you grow your company's experience in Africa is make it a valuable life experience and enjoy it. And I think that that's kind of a holistic way of seeing it, but that's how I've run my own company, and I know that's how Lindsay runs her company. So, and we're enjoying what we do right across Africa in many different countries.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't want to take the floor from Laura, but people are WhatsApping me. So and she has done a fantastic job. It's just that people are WhatsApping. Alberto Villar, the one who just posed the question, is from Servicio Móvil. It's one of is the key logistic company here for all type of healthcare material, fungible healthcare material, and all not only in Galicia, but also they're all over Spain and expanding to Portugal and other markets now. They're starting their internationalization. They started also by digitalization of hospital documents, but now they are really into the logistics. They were one of the companies that helped the distribution of PPEs during the pandemic. And we also have with us Borja, that the poor guy is on the plane right now, so you see him in camera. But and he was a bit shy to just start talking in the plane, but he has actually convey his question. They work with non-textile, so they work with material. Well, they started with zippers, but then I got to know them in the cluster because they provide all the first material, the raw material for doing the mask, preparing the mask, also the main components, but also the rubbers, the metal parts. They also do control with stickers in different materials, but they are really interested to know how the market, not only of PPEs, but also the market for non-textile products is in Africa, regarding also the industrial sectors and agriculture sectors, because they would like to know a bit, if you can, of course, it's very broad, but if you can give a tip, is that an interesting sector? Because we have, Laura will now summarize the different companies that have been attending. And it's very, as you can see, it's very broad type of companies, but they are more into the production of material, non-textile material.
I was thinking about putting slides in about some of the other sectors, because the healthcare side does affect into other sectors. The agriculture sector has, in the last 2 years, gone like a rocket. And African agriculture is getting a lot of attention. We've come out of some droughts that were, if you remember, Cape Town was almost out of water maybe 2.5 years ago. But what we've seen is that the agriculture in Africa has grown in 2020, even during COVID, about 20%. And so this year we're expecting 2021 to be even bigger and better. So this is all about exporting. A lot of it is specialty crops. There's a lot of new technologies that are coming into the agricultural sector. Agritech is another big area of our expertise. We have 3 people that focus on the agribusiness sector in our company to work across Africa. The mining sector. Mining has done very well in the last year. many of the mining companies across Africa are having record profits. They're reporting record profits right now. So that means that there's a lot of potential there. The market for creating localized PPE, very interesting question, because what happened was Africa seemed to be the last market when everybody else was panicking around the world. Africa seemed to be the last market where you could find anything, because there were small amounts here and there, and maybe one small manufacturer did something here. And one of the good things is that there isn't a lot of just-in-time production in Africa, so people will hold inventories and then try to sell it. And so there's a good opportunity for requirements in that. South Africa and other countries do have companies that specialize in the manufacture of high-end safety equipment and some types of PPE. So, you know, we do have a market that exists for the things like zippers and those sorts of things. In fact, one of my best friends works with rivets. All he does is sell rivets into the South African clothing manufacturing sector. So there is a market for these kinds of things across Africa. I think it would be good to speak to you specifically about the different requirements, but some sectors, like I said, agriculture and mining have done very well, and where your company meets with those, that's also a good one. There are some companies, countries that didn't do so well, but they're picking up again. And even through all of the bad times we've had, the automotive sector in South Africa has increased, for example. So even it's looking at 2021 is going to be a much better year than 2019. So, yeah.
Perfect, thanks. Borja was just in time to hear you because they were taking off. So
I think he vanished.
Yeah, he had to actually cut off the connection, but he was really interested in entering into the discussion, and he transmitted this. And of course, since this is recorded, there's a lot of people that have been asking for that. I have one last question, WhatsApp way. That they just transmitted, and then I leave poor Laura that I took her stage right now. So we also have companies related with hospital constructions, as we mentioned in our first time that we met, and water, not only water, but waste management, specific waste management for hospitals of their higher risk. And so we have him in the conversation also, but he's on a train or whatever. So he's Diego Romero. He's connected. You can see him there. And he was asking if how is the market, because it's very unknown for them. They actually are in Mali and some other countries, African countries. I mean, they're quite widespread. Together with Grupo Puentes, I don't know if you know them, but they are also a construction company, but they are specializing in hospitals. They're more present up to now in Latin America, but they're really introducing themselves in Africa. So they were asking about the market regarding waste management, but especially from water, because right now they're really dealing with water treatment. And if you want, I can tell you other sectors that are kind of asking if their sector is represented in Africa. No? And of course, the tech sector that we mentioned, it's also present here. The ones that manage health records and hospital flux of work are also present in this INFODAY. So I guess that is more what we talked at the beginning, but we didn't talk so much about these companies of construction, waste management, and also another company here present is they usually go together, these two companies, the construction company and this other company, which is regarding management of medical devices. So I don't know how you call that in English, but they usually are the ones in charge to accompany this construction company and determine, okay, surgery room has to be with these conditions, and then you really have to put 5 plugs here, and you know the bed should be able to enter, and the type of light will be this. So they don't produce medical devices, but they are complementary to companies from our cluster that do sell or produce or distribute medical devices, but they go with them all together to make sure that the scanner is really placed correctly with the correct room, environment, conditions, electricity power, etc. I don't know how you call that in English. Sorry, I had to do a whole description of that. But it's like management of the inventory of the hospital, where to put the rooms. And this may seem trivial. At least at the beginning, I thought, wow, you can earn your living doing that. But actually, it's very, very important, because there has been some funny mistakes that don't seem funny once you see, like, I don't know, surgery rooms that you cannot enter the material after, or the way you have to sterilize is not convenient, or you put it next to, I'm exaggerating here, but you put something of very high risk next to the cafeteria of the personnel or something like that. You know, these things have happened. So they usually go together. And as I mentioned, that's why our delegation normally goes together, because these are the type of companies that come with us, you know, from the tech company to the construction company to the medical device company. So I think it's complementary when you travel.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at all the different sectors. Water management and potable water for even institutions do have to often have their own systems, and so it's important. And we've done a lot of work in that sector. So hard to say exactly where they're talking about. Medical waste, hazardous waste from medical environments is it's an important market across Africa, and it's a growing market. So I would say that is also one where there's a lot of potential. Data records, that's one that grows because it really helps with every different system. The good thing is that we have young people that are trainable on computers, and we have the ability. Often we're probably stuck somewhere at government funding, often for systems, and the systems are incredibly important. So as we see the build out go up, it's important. The first thing that we find with data systems is that the private healthcare, private clinics take it up. There's typically in a lot of countries, there are smaller companies that want to partner with companies so that they can be the people on the ground making the internal suggestions to the hospital or clinic institutions, rather than trying to sell it directly to hospital or clinic solutions yourself. So it's good to work with a local partner who understands all of the local end buyers and that sort of thing. So data management is incredibly important, and it's a big growing area. Then I'm trying to think the last, operational management for planning the rooms and that kind of thing. Everything that goes into hospital architecture we found is interesting, particularly even materials, and where there's a good market. So what would be appropriate in an ICU unit or a clinic generally? You know, you can find that you're going to find a good market where people have the need and the ability to pay. And the good thing about Africa is that the market's growing so quickly, you can meet these people before other people have come to them with a solution. So it's that kind of a place. I would say that in a market with a market like Africa, we want a comprehensive solution. People want to see somebody coming in with an umbrella solution. So the fact that you do have parties that and companies that work together in cooperation, that's good, and you can come in and offer a package together possibly. I'm assuming that you're saying something similar to that one of them could come in and work as, and so offering the package solution. The package solution can take years to sell, of course, because you're looking at big budgets, you're looking at getting into planning and operations, and often the timing between planning and implementation can often be years. It's not a short time, as everybody understands, but these are things that we deal with, and we're familiar with them because we've dealt with the hospital architecture sector and hospital operations, management operations as well. So, yeah.
And last before, so we heard about the African ID. You know, that they were trying to make like a common African ID for Estonia specifically, which we collaborate a lot. They were going to Nigeria, Rwanda just before COVID, because from the African governments, I don't know exactly which, but a number of countries from Africa were organizing one single African ID.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of how this is progressing? I imagine it must not be easy to put, you know, such different countries with a common strategy. It's not easy to get Europeans to do it, you know, either.
Yeah, we're still a long ways away from that. In South Africa, we have our own ID cards, and they only went from, I don't have my booklet with me, but we went from a passport-sized booklet just about 3 years ago, and it was like a little booklet, and it was like carrying a passport with you forever. And then they made it into a credit card sized card. But that's only been recent, and most people have transferred over to the card, but some people still carry the green ID book. Now, South Africa is more advanced than other countries. And so the national rollout for national IDs is important, but other countries are going to be doing it on a national basis. There is not right now an institution that is going to be putting in place a single African ID card. But that may develop as the continental free trade area develops. But I don't foresee that in the near future, but that doesn't mean there's not a good market for that type of technology, because we have a lot of different national entities that are looking for solutions. Every time we have an election, you've got to show your ID. That's big politics in the US. Sometimes one of the parties is saying, no, you don't have to show your ID to go vote now. But in Africa, you have to show your ID to vote. So
here as well.
Yeah. So I think you know, there's a lot of different national jurisdictions. And interestingly enough, wherever you have one of those, then you have a lot of different opportunities, because there may be some smaller countries that will take your product, but the big country may not. They'll see what's going on in the smaller country, and then eventually they will be interested. And so some countries like Botswana or Mauritius or Namibia, they may be keen on your product line, and they may only have 2 or 2.5 million people in their country, but then South Africa will notice, and then you can say to the South African companies, we've already got this operationally working in your neighboring country. Why don't you have a look at it? And you know, one company, one question we always get is this already working in our country? And we usually say, well, typically it's not, but you can look at it working in the other country, the neighboring country, or you may have to look at the product working in another country. And this is because the medical sector is relatively conservative by nature. They don't want to take risks with human lives. And so they want to see that something works before they will try it themselves. So there's a lot of importance placed on the credibility. Even if we have a relatively lower threshold for regulatory requirements, there is still a very high requirement for the feasibility of the product to work in your market. And so there is that factor.
Okay, I zip my mouth now and I let Laura take the stage because I think she had some other few questions. Thank you so much, Richard.
Okay,
And I'm looking forward to go to Africa.
Thank you.
Okay, so I summarize some questions, so I'm going to ask 3 maybe. So, could you give us some tips regarding the doing business? Oh, no, so sorry, I'm going to start with this one. I don't know if you can summarize with 3 words the main advantages of doing business in Africa.
The
Sorry,
main
my connection.
Yeah, the main
This
advantages
doesn't
of
work.
doing business in Africa.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, because
I would say that there's flexibility involved, and there's a lot of different countries. So you could, if you want to try a regional strategy, you don't have to be tied to one country. You might be able to look at different distributors in different countries to see that. African people typically have more flexibility than Europeans. I know that Spain is more flexible than Germany, for example. So we're a little bit more flexible than Spain. And I think that that also helps with, if you can understand that and come to, and it's part of the nature of your company, being flexible can be a very positive thing as things, because it doesn't just mean slower, it can also mean faster. And if both parties want to work more quickly toward a goal, then they can. And it's not so much of an organizational problem as it might be in Europe, for example. So that is one thing. I'd also say that coming in, one of the, I've already indicated this, but if your product comes from Europe, you don't have to argue that you have a high quality product. People understand and believe you already. So you're one of the benefits of coming from Spain to Africa is that you immediately have a quality assurance as part of your character. And I think that that's important. And you have to live that. You have to be part of that quality assurance as you continue to develop your relationship. So being conscientious in your business dealings. Now, with Africans, you'll find that sometimes they will not be so constrained with time, and this is particularly the older people. The younger people are very as close to being regimented to time as I am as a Canadian, but older people tend to be more flexible. And it's not because they don't value time, it's because they value human relationships in time more than they value the transactions in time. And so if you're working with them, understand that. And I think that that can be a very positive thing in working with Africa as well, because they value the relationships very highly, and that means that they value who you are. And in the end, you'll find that if you have a need and it's viewed as an emergency, they will come to your help very quickly, much more than people from other nationalities would. And it's surprising that people take a personal aspect to their business dealings and a personal commitment to it.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. I have another question. Could you give us some tips regarding business culture in Africa? I imagine there are differences among the different countries.
Some of the differences.
Yeah. Regarding, sorry.
Africa is a very big place. I think I'm going to, okay, they want me to describe some of the differences in the different African countries. Do you want to talk about Gambia and Ghana, maybe, or Gambia and South Africa?
You can summarize, yeah, where you, for example, here in Spain, it's very different than north and the south. So,
okay. Lindsay will add something here, and then I'll
yeah, of course,
complete the response.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head what I would share with you, but the first thing that comes to mind is that the different countries have different working hours. So, for example, in South Africa, everyone's up and running from 7 till 5, I would say, or 7 to 4, whereas in Kenya, people say, you know, they start at 8, but they actually start at 9, and people prefer to end off earlier because there's a lot of traffic in the big cities. It's something you can't even imagine. It just takes you hours and hours to get from A to B. So I think that's something you would have to factor into your considerations if you're considering face-to-face visits. The traffic is really, it's something I've certainly not experienced in other places. It's quite something. And then, yes, in the Gambia, they would work, you know, they start the day for an hour and then they have breakfast for an hour and then they work and then they have lunch and they tend to finish off early. So the working hours and the flow of work and it changes place to place, really. Yep. So that would be my initial thought.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is enough. Yeah.
Here's something interesting. For a lot of the meetings that we put together in East Africa, for example, our staff have to get into a car and meet with those people before we even have a virtual meeting with the Spanish company. So we have to meet with them and confirm that we're going to have a meeting with the Spanish company. But in South Africa, we get on the telephone, and I was watching a YouTube and it said, if you're an older person, you'll do this as a phone sign. And if you're a young person, you'll do this. Show me you holding a phone. Okay, this is how a young person does it. This is how an older person does it. So I'll say, okay, so but here in South Africa, all we have to do is get on the telephone and talk to that person and ask them for the appointment. And maybe it might take a few emails and that sort of thing, but we don't have to meet with them. But in East Africa, we do. We have to typically go and our staff will go and meet with them. And often in West Africa, Cephas is online and he will have to go get into a taxi and drive from place to place, meeting the companies that we're going to be having meetings with. And so this is something where creating the relationship is important. They want to see the context. They want to see the credibility of the group that's creating the meeting. And so where we are looking at the stronger the requirement for relationship building, the stronger we see that kind of a behavior. So, sorry?
Can I reiterate?
Yeah, sure. And Lindsay has something to add.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I also just wanted to say that in Africa, I think like anywhere in the world, but particularly in Africa, your relationship is key. You have to spend time building that relationship. You have to spend time with people, and you've got to make time for that in your considerations. They're very relationship focused, and once you've established that relationship, it really is fairly easy to do business. They will bend over backwards to work with you and to collaborate with you. And the people are generally very, very friendly, very open, and they also want to do well. So there's definitely that hunger there to collaborate and to make something good. Often there is a little bit of mentorship involved, depending on the level of the person that you're with. But you accept that and you mentor as you go as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And another question. You previously said, Richard, that Ghana is very interested in working with Spain, but there is another market in Africa with the same vision?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, sorry, because my Wi-Fi is not working so well. You probably said that Ghana is very interested in working with Spain, but there is another market in Africa with the same vision?
Sorry, Madrid has the same mission?
With the same vision.
No, sorry, same vision.
The same vision. So in other words,
Are there other countries, Richard? Are there other
Oh
countries?
yeah,
in vision of
definitely.
building
We've
relationships?
had so we've been successful in helping companies from Spain coming into the agricultural market, coming into the food market. So we're I would say it's right across Africa.
Yeah.
And Spain is people in Africa know Spain. And they want to travel there. So you have an interesting country. That's another thing that's a very positive thing. And it's not expensive to travel to Spain. So the good thing is that in building those relationships, you have a lot of the benefit. A lot of the countries that are in Africa are already very keen on working closely and helping their companies to sell into the European Union. And so the trade and investment side of things provides for a very open kind of an environment for companies to come in and work. So it's not just Ghana. You can see that, but I think what is interesting is that the Kingdom of Spain has made an emphasis on creating Africa as a key entry point right now. And so I believe that there's hopefully going to be resources at your national level to help companies coming in and working with Africa. But also the fact is that typically when the governments have made an announcement saying that they like to work together, it does provide almost a marketing side to your smaller efforts as a company to come in, and you can say everything has an official seal of approval. We're looking forward to that, and considering too that Africa is more hierarchical still with the older people. They look at these kind of agreements as very important. So although we did highlight Ghana as one country, there's other countries that are very keen on working with Spanish companies.
Yes, I would also like to add to that and say that I have definitely seen collaborations between various organizations and Spain on my travels throughout the continent over the last 10 years, 20 years. Yeah.
And like I say, the Galicians are much more relationship oriented than some of the places from the bigger metropoles. And this is a benefit. Your culture is part of your competitive advantage. And I think that's going to be a big differentiator in how you come and make friends and create business on the continent.
Okay.
By the
So
way,
the last
Richard, I'm
questions.
Catalan, but I'm quite social.
That's true. Yes.
It's like I'm from Barcelona, but
Yeah.
we still like social. But no, I understand what you mean. We've talked about this in the first one. Laura, I don't know if you have time. I just put on screen because poor Laura is running out of battery.
Yeah.
And so in case, please go ahead and ask the last question so you can.
Yeah, the last question is, most of our companies here are specialized in different sectors, as I told you, from logistics to waste treatment, healthcare, management of medical devices. Which kind of sectors do you think have most opportunities when doing business in Africa?
She's saying which sector? Yeah. Oh, you're hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every sector.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
Africa is so big that when we talk to companies, we can say there's a need in Kenya, there's a need in Rwanda, there's a need in Tunisia or South Africa particularly, or because it's such a big place. It's like saying, where's the need in Europe?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's almost everything will have a market in Africa somewhere, because South Africa, for example, is very sophisticated, has all the same technology that you could find in Europe. very responsive private healthcare sector, relatively large public sector. And then you go to smaller countries where the public sector may be very strong, like Botswana, or you could go to places where there's a huge need for very inexpensive requirements for a certain type of diagnostic test, and maybe Nigeria is your market. So we have such a diversity of countries and markets that it makes it very very interesting place to look at. So that's not an easy question to ask, but it depends on each company on an individual basis. And then we can discuss it, and then we would probably have a team discussion about which markets would be best strategically to look at first, and then to follow it up. Africa, if you look at Africa, it's not one market per se. It's moving toward one market, but logistically, it is, and the companies that are working in the logistics side, it's almost like an archipelago of islands, because you can come into South Africa, but you can't drive a truck into the Congo, for example. You can go to Kenya, but you won't be able to drive or to use a railway to get to South Africa. So a lot of these are disruptors, but they can also be a benefit to you as the infrastructure comes together. There may be infrastructure companies that you're working with, logistics companies. So there may be opportunities in that, but it's a huge market with a population the size of China right now that's growing. And in fact, where China was developmentally in 1980 is approximately where Africa is now. But Africa's got the benefit of global information at the fingertips, an open knowledge economy, which China does not have. And it's got a young population that's very entrepreneurial and outward looking, that wants to come and create business. And they speak the global languages of English and French. And the English ones are very fast moving and coming together very quickly. The French speaking ones are about 2 years behind. So, we find that that it's a very quick moving market where there's a lot happening, and a lot of companies can benefit from different parts of the continent. So it's not all one economy, and typically there's something for everybody in different parts of the continent.
Okay, so I think that's all for today. We are out of time, so thank you very much, Richard and Lisa, for this amazing information, and we are in contact.
Okay, we're looking forward to working.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Beatriz wants to say something from Market Access, or if not, we will for sure contact you briefly again, because we hope to be able to. Our companies are very interested in going to Africa in general. As you can see, we are very broad, so we were really enthusiastic about Ghana, and even more when you told us now you presented the opportunity. But our our agencies of innovation sometimes are a bit too stiff. So, but definitely we will start our first experiences with Africa for sure. I hope. And Beatriz, you're only with the headphones, so you're not going to be able to speak. You have to hit the phone button symbol, exit, and ask for microphone. So, Richard, it was a pleasure. And Lindsay, the first time I met, I was already dreaming to going to South Africa for a living. Even I was thinking, maybe it's a possibility. But I will start first with the learning expeditions. I think it's a more cautious way to start. And hopefully the world will recover from all this situation that has really has stopped our lives all across the world. I have one last question that enters through WhatsApp, and I would like to present it because we did talk about this on our first meeting about the social care part. Okay, many of our companies are also involved in social care. You've mentioned it, and you've highlighted again how young the African population is. 18, 19 years is quite, compared to Galicia, I can tell you that's a big difference, because here it's like we're the oldest area in the world, more than Japan, despite COVID has reduced in 2-year expectancy. That's been terrible if you think about it. But we do have social companies interested and very advanced in innovation, and they're asking if you do see an evolution, let's say in mid or short term, of how the care is for elderly. You do mention that the family structure is still very important. It is here in Galicia as well. So like here we have ladies, I'm pointing out because outside where I live in a rural area, and there are people over 100 years old walking around and with the gossip perfectly clear in their heads. But of course, we do see a shift, no, for the type of life we are enduring now, and the speed and the connections, and despite COVID, we are still too stressed, I would say, out. And this also migration movements make the situation that the family is not around anymore. So we do have very strong companies that take care not only in care homes itself, but really home-based care services. So do you see any chance, possibility, interesting for them to explore or to start exploring this, or they should wait a couple of years to not even access the market?
The growth in senior care is happening all across Africa, and as people need the care, they're rolling out these programs. So this is something where we're shifting culturally from the family looking after the elderly to families that now have the funding, where they're more professional and maybe they want to put somebody into a professional care home. There's different levels of care. South Africa is the largest market for this because amongst people of European ancestry, the age is very different than the young blacks. And so there's a growing market here in South Africa for that kind of thing. It's going to depend upon the offering, and it'd be interesting to talk about that. But typically those countries where private care is important and people are able to spend their retirement savings. And so that's another thing. Where would those retirement savings have come from? You have to have a stream of income, maybe for the last 20 or 30 years to allow that. Which countries would have done that? There's only a few, maybe Mauritius, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, for example. And then the other countries, people by necessity are going to have to look after their elderly, but within about 15 or 20 years, the market's going to go like this.
Okay, so I will tell them, I will enthusiastically encourage them to come.
It depends very much what the product is, but yes, what Richard said is absolutely accurate. Yeah.
We do have products. We do have products of, friendly digital devices for communication and things like that, wearables, but we are very much focused on person-centered care. So we won't be so much in favor of wearables where the person loses its autonomy, his or her autonomy and consciousness. That we tend not to like recording devices that are a bit intrusive on the person's life. So most of our companies are very much oriented into, I would say, focus into two. One is person-centered care methodology, services, really humanized services. And the other part that you mentioned during your talk was training. We have people that are really focused on training, especially because social care, like senior training, gerontologists, are very much, first of all, very badly paid. And that also makes it difficult to be a good professional and be able to live out of it. Live from it, but now, of course, that's improving, and actually, pandemia has also made it possible many things. It has made possible that this training can reach further out by online platforms that they have developed. So I mean, I wouldn't say, I think that the push that we have experienced on that, I hope is positive at the end of the outcome, no? In the sense of being able to get training in a more, well, remote way. We still love face-to-face encounters. So I can confirm that, because we just had the assembly, as I mentioned, on Wednesday, and really people were eager to get together to talk, and there were people saying, I haven't met this other member that we were talking and collaborating for more than a year. And it's incredible, no? And that is an important point that you were mentioning about our cultures, no? Because and actually the problem was that we were doing it hybrid. So when we did the break, we couldn't extend it more than 10 minutes, because more than 10 minutes over the time, because other people at home were connected, waiting for the continuation of the event. But at that point, if it was face to face, I think we should have done a coffee break of 1 hour and a half, because people had, the need to really talk and encounter. So